My name is Natalie Brooks. I was 46 years old, lying in a hospital bed at St. Mary's Medical Center, when my mother walked through the door and destroyed what should have been the happiest moment of my life. I was holding my newborn daughter, Lily, 3 days old, perfect in every way that mattered. The adoption had taken 18 months of paperwork, home visits, and sleepless nights wondering if I'd ever get to be a mom. Now she was finally here, wrapped in a pink blanket, her tiny fingers curled around mine. My mother stopped at the foot of the bed, looked at Lily, and sneered. "So this is what ruined your life," she said, loud enough for the nurses to hear. The room went silent. I felt my chest cave in. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just looked up at her and said quietly, "Check your account. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. Every share helps these stories reach someone who needs to hear them. Let's keep the conversation going." She barely blinked at my words. Instead, she kept going, circling the bed like a shark who'd smelled blood. "You're 46, Natalie. 46 and starting over with a baby like some desperate teenager. Do you know how embarrassing this is for me?" Her voice dripped with contempt. A nurse near the window shifted uncomfortably, pretending to adjust the blinds. Another one kept her eyes glued to the monitor beside my bed. My mother didn't care. She never did. "Everyone at the club is asking me why you couldn't just accept that some women aren't meant to be mothers. But no, you had to prove something." She laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "This was a mistake, Natalie. You'll see that soon enough." I looked down at Lily's face, peaceful and trusting. I whispered again, "Check your account, Mom." Her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it at first, still glaring at me like I was a disappointment she couldn't scrub away. "You think you can handle this?" she asked, gesturing at Lily. "You couldn't even handle a marriage. You couldn't give your ex-husband a child. And now you're going to raise someone else's mistake." The nurse by the door finally spoke up. "Ma'am, maybe you should step outside." My mother turned on her, eyes flashing. "I'll leave when I'm ready." But her phone buzzed again. And again. She yanked it out of her purse with an irritated huff, glanced at the screen, and scoffed. She shoved it back without reading the full message. "I have a headache," she announced suddenly. "I'll come back when you're thinking clearly." She left without saying goodbye to Lily, without even looking at her. After she was gone, the nurse who'd been at the door approached my bed slowly. Her name tag read Brenda. She had kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Do you want her barred from returning?" she asked gently. I thought about it. The power to say yes, to protect Lily from that poison, sat right there in front of me. But I shook my head. "Not yet," I said. Brenda nodded like she understood something I hadn't said out loud. The truth was, my mother had always been like this. When I got divorced at 38, she told me I'd wasted my best years. When I struggled with infertility, she said it was probably for the best. When I decided to adopt, she called it selfish. This wasn't new. It was just the cruelest version yet. What my mother didn't know was that I'd been planning for this moment for a long time. Not planning revenge exactly. Planning protection. Years ago, when my father died, my mother spiraled. She didn't know how to manage money, didn't want to deal with lawyers or accountants or tax forms. So I stepped in. I organized everything. Her investments, her healthcare directives, her estate planning. She'd sign papers without reading them, too proud to admit she didn't understand. She trusted me because she had no choice. And I'd used that trust to build a cage she didn't even see. Everything ran through me now. Every account, every decision. She thought she was in control. She wasn't. She hadn't been for years. And I'd been waiting for the day she crossed a line I couldn't forgive. That night, after Lily fell asleep in the bassinet beside my bed, I checked my email on my phone. The transfer had gone through exactly as planned. I'd set it up months ago, long before Lily arrived, back when my mother made a cruel comment about me playing house with an adopted child. The money hadn't vanished. It had been restructured into a living trust with strict terms she'd agreed to without reading. At the time, she thought she was signing routine estate updates. She wasn't. She was signing away her power. I stared at the confirmation email, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Then I heard my mother's voice in my head again. This was a mistake. I put the phone down. She was about to notice. And I was ready. The call came at 6 in the morning. My phone vibrated on the bedside table, waking me from a shallow sleep. Lily stirred but didn't cry. I answered without looking at the screen. You stole from me, my mother shrieked. Her voice was raw, frantic. My account is frozen. Everything is locked. What did you do? I sat up slowly, careful not to disturb Lily. Nothing illegal, I said calmly. Everything was done according to the documents you signed. If you check the paperwork, you'll see your signature on every page. She was breathing hard, like she'd been running. You tricked me. You manipulated me into signing things I didn't understand. I didn't raise my voice. You signed them willingly. You told me you trusted me to handle it. I did exactly what you asked. She started crying then. Ugly sobs that used to make me feel guilty. Not anymore. I'm calling my lawyer, she spat. Days passed. No lawyer called. I stayed home with Lily, learning her rhythms, feeding her every 3 hours, changing diapers, marveling at how something so small could be so perfect. My mother didn't call again. I thought maybe she'd accepted it. Then, a week later, she showed up at my front door. I saw her through the peephole, pacing on my porch like a caged animal. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was a mess. Her makeup was smudged. I opened the door with Lily in my arms. What do you want? I asked. She tried to push past me, but I blocked her with my body. We need to talk, she said, her voice shaking. Inside. Now. I didn't move. Why didn't your lawyer call? She flinched. He dropped me. I almost smiled. Almost. I let her in, but only as far as the living room. She sat on the edge of my couch, hands twisting in her lap, eyes darting around like she was looking for something to grab onto. I stayed standing, Lily asleep against my shoulder. The account wasn't drained, I said finally. It was restructured. Everything is still there. You just don't have unrestricted access anymore. Her head snapped up. What does that mean? I sat down across from her, keeping Lily close. It means the money is in a living trust. You get a monthly allowance for essentials, housing, healthcare, groceries. But discretionary spending? That's controlled now. By me. Her face twisted. You can't do that. I met her eyes. I already did. And you agreed to it. You signed the documents 3 years ago, remember? You said you didn't want the hassle of managing everything yourself. She opened her mouth, then closed it. There's more, I said. The trust has behavioral clauses. Her face went white. What kind of clauses? I kept my voice steady, clinical. Any documented emotional abuse toward me or my child triggers the loss of discretionary funds. Permanently. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. You're insane. I shook my head. I'm protected. There's a difference. She stood up, hands shaking. Who decides what counts as abuse? You? You're going to twist everything I say. I didn't stand. I didn't need to. Hospital witnesses count, I said simply. Nurses heard what you said about Lily. About me. I have their statements. Your lawyer saw them too. That's why he dropped you. She stumbled backward, her legs hitting the couch. She sat down hard, staring at nothing. You planned this, she whispered. I nodded. I did. 4 years. Because I knew one day you'd go too far. And you did. She looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully in my arms. She's not even yours. That sentence hung in the air like poison. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice calm. She's mine in every way that matters. And if you ever say otherwise again, you'll lose more than money. My mother's face crumpled. She started crying loud, gasping sobs that filled the room. I didn't mean it, she choked out. I was upset. You're being too sensitive, Natalie. You always have been. I didn't comfort her. I just sat there, rocking Lily gently. You called my baby a mistake, I said quietly. In front of strangers. You said I ruined my life by becoming a mother. Those aren't things you say when you're upset. Those are things you say when you mean them. She reached for me, but I leaned back. Please, she begged. I'll apologize. I'll make it right. I stood up. The clause requires sustained behavior change. Not words. Actions. Over time. Can you do that? The next 2 weeks were chaos. Extended family started calling. My Aunt Stella, my cousin Fiona, even my mother's bridge partner Doris. All of them had the same message. I was being cruel, vindictive, ungrateful. She's your mother, Aunt Stella said over the phone, her voice tight with disapproval. She made a mistake. You need to forgive her. I listened patiently, then forwarded her the email thread. Transcripts of what my mother said in the hospital. Witness statements from 2 nurses. A timeline of every cruel comment she'd made over the past 5 years. Aunt Stella called back an hour later. I didn't know, she said quietly. I'm sorry. The other calls stopped after that. One by one, people pulled back from my mother. Not because I asked them to. Because they finally saw what I'd been living with. She'd built her reputation on being the devoted, suffering mother of a difficult daughter. Now the mask was cracking. My mother tried to rebuild. She hosted a dinner party, invited her usual circle of friends, and acted like nothing had changed. But people knew. Word had spread quietly, the way it always does in small communities. Invitations that used to flood her mailbox dried up. Her book club stopped returning her calls. Even the country club, where she'd been a member for 20 years, suddenly had scheduling conflicts whenever she tried to reserve the dining room. She called me one night, her voice slurred. I could hear ice clinking in a glass. You've ruined me, she said. Everyone thinks I'm a monster. I was feeding Lily, the phone tucked between my shoulder and my ear. I didn't tell them anything that wasn't true. She laughed bitterly. You didn't have to. You just had to be the victim. That's what you're good at. I hung up. A week later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, 3 pages long, carefully worded. It was an apology. She acknowledged what she'd said in the hospital, admitted it was hurtful, and promised to respect my choices as a mother. It was perfect. Too perfect. I read it twice, then pulled out the trust documents. The behavioral clause required specific language, specific commitments. I compared the letter to the requirements. It matched. Word for word in some places. She'd had help. Probably a lawyer, maybe a therapist. Someone had coached her on exactly what to say to unlock her money. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Then I wrote back. 1 sentence, actions, not words. The problem with my mother was that she couldn't help herself. Change required humility, and she had none. The trust clause was clear. Sustained behavior meant 6 months without documented cruelty. No insults. No manipulation. No public humiliation. Just basic human decency. She lasted 3 weeks. My cousin Fiona called me, voice tight with anger. Your mom just told me Lily would have been better off with real parents. I closed my eyes. Did you record it? There was a pause. Actually, yes. I thought you might ask. She sent me the audio file that night. My mother's voice casual and cutting, saying Lily deserved a younger mother, a married mother, a mother who could give her a normal life. I saved the file. Then I called the trustee. The trustee was a man named Harold Finch, a state lawyer my father had trusted before he died. He was in his 60s, calm and methodical, the kind of person who never acted without documentation. I sent him the audio file along with a written summary of the violation. He called me back within an hour. This triggers the permanent clause, he said. Once I file the paperwork, the restrictions become irreversible. Are you sure? I looked at Lily, sleeping in her crib, tiny chest rising and falling. I'm sure, he sighed. I'll notify her tomorrow. I thanked him and hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty, because I felt free. My mother showed up at my door the next morning. She didn't knock. She pounded over and over, screaming my name. I opened it with Lily in my arms, and she lunged forward. I stepped back, and she stopped, breathing hard. You can't do this, she shouted. You can't take everything from me. I kept my voice low. I didn't take anything. You lost it. Because you couldn't stop being cruel for even a month. Her face twisted with rage. That recording was private. Fiona had no right. I shook my head. You said it. You meant it. And now you're facing the consequences. She pointed at Lily, her hand shaking. She's the one who ruined everything. If you hadn't adopted her, none of this would have happened. I stepped forward, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. Get out. Now. She didn't move. Or what? I smiled. Or I'll add this conversation to the file too. She left, but not quietly. She screamed at me from the driveway, loud enough for neighbors to hear. She called me ungrateful, vindictive, a monster. She said I'd stolen her life, her money, her dignity. She said she wished I'd never been born. I closed the door and locked it. Inside, I sat on the floor and held Lily close, letting the tears come. Not because I was sad, because I was finally, completely done. The next day, I sent a final email to Harold Finch. Subject line, no contact clause. If she showed up again, if she called, if she sent letters, the trust would cut off even the essentials. She'd have nothing. He replied with one word, approved. The weeks that followed were strange. Quiet in a way my life had never been. My mother didn't call, didn't show up, didn't send letters. I checked my phone compulsively at first, expecting her rage to come flooding back. But it didn't. I learned later that Harold had arranged for her to receive just enough to live on, a small apartment, basic health care, groceries delivered weekly. No luxuries. No control. No power. She was alive, but diminished. Exactly what the trust was designed to do. And I felt nothing. Not guilt. Not relief. Just peace. Lily grew. She smiled at 6 weeks. She laughed at 2 months. She reached for my face and held on tight. And I got to experience all of it without my mother's shadow looming over me. That more than anything felt like justice. One afternoon, I was at the park with Lily, pushing her in a baby swing, when I saw my mother. She was sitting on a bench across the path, watching us. She looked older, thinner. Her clothes were plain, her hair unstyled. For a moment, our eyes met. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just turned back to Lily and kept pushing the swing. My mother stood up slowly and walked away. I never saw her again. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. If I wish I'd handled things differently, given her more chances, been more forgiving. I tell them the truth. I gave her 46 years of chances. I absorbed her cruelty, her manipulation, her need to make me feel small. I forgave her over and over until forgiveness became enabling. The hospital room wasn't the beginning. It was the end. And when she looked at my newborn daughter and called her a mistake, she made her choice. I just made mine. The irony is that my mother gave me everything I needed to protect myself. She taught me to be meticulous, to document everything, to plan ahead. She wanted me to manage her life because she was too proud to do it herself. And in doing so, she handed me the keys to her cage. She never saw it coming. She thought love meant I'd tolerate anything. That blood meant I owed her endless grace. But love isn't unconditional when it's one-sided. And family isn't sacred when it's abusive. She taught me that too, even if she didn't mean to. People get it wrong when they call this revenge. Revenge is about punishment. What I did was about protection. I didn't destroy my mother's life out of spite. I built boundaries with consequences because words and tears and apologies had never worked before. She'd always come back. Always found a way to wound me again. The trust didn't take away her humanity. It took away her access to mine. And that's not cruelty. That's survival. Justice doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a restructured trust and a lawyer who doesn't flinch when you say, make it permanent. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's simple. Cruelty thrives on access. It needs proximity, opportunity, power. Take those away, and cruelty starves. My mother spent years feeding on my guilt, my hope that she'd change, my belief that family meant I had to endure. When I finally cut off her supply, she withered. Not because I wanted her to suffer, because I refused to suffer anymore. And if you're reading this, wondering if you're being too harsh, too unforgiving, too cold, ask yourself this: how many times have you bled trying to prove you're worth loving? At some point, the knife has to be taken away, even if the person holding it is your mother. It's been 6 months now. Lily is learning to sit up on her own, grabbing at toys, babbling sounds that almost resemble words. I rock her to sleep every night in the nursery I painted myself. Soft yellow walls, white curtains, a bookshelf already filled with stories I can't wait to read to her. I whisper promises I intend to keep. That she'll grow up knowing she's wanted. That she'll never doubt her worth. That no one, not even family, will be allowed to make her feel small. Somewhere across town, my mother is probably checking her account again. The numbers won't have changed. They never will. And that's exactly how it should be. Because love is an ode. It's earned. And she stopped earning it the moment she looked at my daughter and called her a mistake. I chose Lily. And I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over.